Hello everyone, I'm Kina Tangi Dorsey and I'm so excited to be here with you today teaching the Easy Does It Quilted Zipper Bag Workshop. The pattern is by Annie and it's a free download. And I really love making this bag because it's really fun and versatile and you can customize it any way you like. So go ahead and download that pattern and let's get started. So this is the bag that we'll be making today. Okay, so here are my 3 fat quarter selections. Okay, so I have my main fabric. This is the fabric that is going to be used on the exterior of the bag. It's going to be the front of the bag, the back of the bag, and then the zipper strip and side strip. That's going to be quilted. Then this is the second fat quarter that I'm going to use, and this is going to be the lining of the bag. So this is going to be on the interior of the bag, and this is also going to be quilted. And then this is my third coordinating fat quarter, and this is going to be used for bias binding, and then it's also going to be used for the handles on the outside of the bag, as well as little side strip bindings on the outside of the bag. So this is going to be our coordinating fabric that gives us pops of color on the outside and inside of the bag. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about these fabrics. So this is sort of a layout of how these fabrics are going to work together. And anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely love African wax fabrics. So that's what you are looking at. They are 100% cotton. I love using these fabrics in my quilts, in my bags, and crafts projects, you name it. I just love them. They're bright, they're beautiful. The patterns, as you can see, are very large scale and just really, really fun. The thing about African fabrics, the pattern repeat can be very different within 1 yard of fabric. So what I decided to do today for this bag, instead of choosing 3 different assorted fabrics, I actually cheated and I'm using 2. So if you didn't notice, this is actually 1 fabric. So this piece of fabric is just cut from different parts of the yard. And so since it's so different, I figured the lining would be on the inside, and then this beautiful colorful part will be the main part of my bag. And then I just kind of found another coordinating fabric to kind of serve as the accents. So if you are using something like this and you find that one part of the fabric has a completely different pattern but the same color scheme and will work, you can actually use that. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you, this is the complete rotation of the yard. And so what I did was I cut it into quarters, and I used 1 quarter for the lining, and I'll be using the other quarter for the front of the bag. So that's just a little trick that I use because these are the type of textiles that I like to work with. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is a zipper. So this is the zipper that I'm going to use, and I just picked a color that's in my color palette, and I found a zipper a color that I wanted to use that would kind of blend in. Now I could have used pink, I could have used orange, I could have used cream, burgundy, but I decided to go with this one. Now the pattern's actually going to need a zipper that is 15 inches long, but the zipper that I am using today is a by Annie handbag zipper. For the handbags, I would highly recommend using a handbag zipper as opposed to a dress zipper. It's going to last much longer, so I would highly recommend that. Okay, the next thing that we'll need is stabilizer. So I'm using a product called by Annie Soft and Stable, and I would highly recommend using a bag stabilizer such as this as opposed to batting. I wouldn't use batting for these bags because you can, but the bag is going to be very floppy and it's not going to be sturdy. Something like this is going to make the bag stand up, give it weight and shape, and it's also very durable. I mean, I have beat this bag up and it has stood the test of time. The next thing is we're going to need a piece of fusible interfacing. And we're just going to need a little piece. And then the last sort of tool or thing that I will bring up is a round rotary cutter ruler. Now these are by Creative Grids and they come in different sizes. And these are great because you can use them with your rotary cutter, and they have like sort of a little rough grippy part on one side, which makes it great. So they're non-slip when you're cutting around them. So if you're going to be making a lot of bags, or if you do circles, piecing, and things like this, this is definitely worth the investment. Otherwise, there's a template in the pattern, and you can just make a template and cut it. And we're going to be using these to round the corners of the bag to give it that nice sort of rounded shape as opposed to a square shape. And that'll be easier for binding and everything else. Okay, so that's everything that we need so far to get started. Now we're ready to get started cutting up the fabric. So to begin, we're actually going to start by cutting out the fabric from the coordinating fabric. Now the coordinating fabric is where we're going to cut our bias binding, we're going to cut our handles, and also the side strip bindings. Now, once we do that, then we'll move on to the quilting of the main fabric, and then we'll come back and add these in. But we'll start with this first. So I'm just placing this on my mat, and I am intentionally not going to say measurements out loud because the measurements are there in the pattern, and sometimes I get so focused on the actual instructions of doing things, numbers, sometimes I say the wrong number or something. So follow along, get the cutting exactly measurements from the pattern, and then we'll go step by step. Okay, so here are our pieces from our coordinating fabric. We have our square that we're going to use to make our bias binding. We have two pieces that we're going to be using. These are going to be folded, and we're going to have interfacing attached to these. These are going to be for the handles. And these are going to be the side strip bindings, what we'll use to cover up where the seams join. So I'm going to set these aside, and now we'll look at how we create our bias binding. So what we need is you're going to need your long rotary cutter, and we're going to make a cut from the top of the upper left-hand corner down to the lower right-hand corner. And now we have two pieces. So now what we're going to do is we're going to join these two pieces together. We're going to sew them back together. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick the short side, and I'm going to line it up with the left side there. And now you're going to kind of have this shape happening. So it's right sides together, and you're going to have about 1/4 of an inch dog hair seam allowance on the end. That's okay. And you just clip it together, and we're going to sew it along this edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then once you sew it, it's going to look like this. You're going to have this parallelogram Oh, I can't say that word. Parallelogram, parallelogram shaped piece of fabric. And then it'll be on the bias, and then that's what's going to give us the bias stretch. So I'm going to sew along here, and then I'm going to iron the seam allowance open. Okay, so here's what it looks like once it's sewn together. My parallelogram. See how I did that? I went away and I practiced it so I could say it better. Okay, so this is how it looks. And then all we really need to do is just kind of trim off those dog hairs right there and get rid of that. All right, so now we're going to make strips from this. So now if you kind of pull it, we're going to cut this way, and there's the give. Now the fabric piece is on the bias. So we're going to make strips 2 1/4 inch wide. So how I do that, you can turn it this way, you can cut this way or this way, but I'm going to trim this way so that I'm cutting away from myself. And I'm just going to use my ruler here. And I'm going to line my 2 1/4 inch line along the bottom. So you want to cut on the long edge, not on the short edge, because the short is the straight. That's not going to give you the bias. It's going to be on the long grain there, so the long side. So I'll start cutting. Just make sure I don't slide around. There's one strip. Okay, so now we have 4 strips that we're going to join together to make one long strip. So when they come together, they're going to be joined on a diagonal, so it's less noticeable where the seams are. So right sides together on that angle, and you'll have about 1/4 inch of little dog hairs left over. And for this, I'll use pins instead of clips. And we're going to sew them together using our 1/4 inch seam allowance. But just so you can have an idea, it's going to look like that. So I'll go ahead and just pin all of these. And then once we sew these together, it's going to be folded in half. Okay, here is our one continued piece of bias binding. And as you see, it has like nice stretch, so it's going to be perfect going around those corners. All right, so this is going to be folded in half, and then we can pin it. So wrong sides together, and then just pin it to hold it closed, maybe every 3 or 4 inches or so. Okay, so here is the binding, and I'm just going to fold it up and we'll set it aside and we'll come back to it later. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to prep the handles and the side bindings. So the handles are, we have 2 of these, they're the larger ones. And we're going to put fusible web on them, and then we'll fold them and top stitch them closed. So fusible interfacing, excuse me. All right, so these are going to be the handles. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fold each one in half with the interfacing in the center. And then you can press it to make a crease mark so that the crease mark would hold. So that's going to be in the center. So I'm going to press this. All right, and then once you press it, when you open it up, you'll see the crease mark. And now what we're going to do is we're going to fold the outside edges into the crease mark like that. So it's going to look like that. Now you can press that if you want, but then you're going to fold it. So what I'm going to do is just have make the double fold and then press that, and that's going to be your handles. So that's what it looks like. And then I'm just going to put some clips to hold it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch around all four sides using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and get some, make sure you find a thread that matches that, because you're going to see that, and you're going to sew all the way around, and then you're going to repeat the same for the other handle. All right, okay, let's do that and we'll come right back. Okay, so now we have the handles, we have the binding ready, and the side strip bindings, which I just folded in half, cut from our coordinating fabric. And these are what we're going to come back to once we start putting the bag together. All right, so we're going to set these aside. And now we're going to move on to talking about getting the bag front and back, the main part of our bag, quilted. So before I move to the long arm, I just like to practice a little bit my quilt design, just so I kind of make sure that's what I want to do. So maybe I'll kind of start out with leaves and do a couple of swirls, and then add some pebbles. And I think I want this scale to be big because it's going to be cut and you're not going to see a lot of the detail, so it's more about the texture. So I'll do some pebbles, and then I'll throw in like a flower, and then maybe some paisleys, which kind of look like blooms a little bit. And then let's see, I'll do like a meandering flower. And go around. Let's see, what else? Maybe elongated swirl. And then start back at my leaves. And then swirls, swirl, pebble. Yeah, and let's see, I went into flower. And then paisleys. And then meandering flower. This kind of gets a little bit sloppy, but you have the idea. Into elongated swirl. Yeah, there you go. And then to my leaves. And then pebbles, so on and so forth. So, my doodling is not the best, but we get the idea. And so, that'll kind of be the scale. And I might do another one if I wanted to practice, but I'm just going to jump right in and do it on the long arm. We're back, and I'm ready to get started quilting my panel for my Easy Does It quilted zipper bag. So I have sandwiched and loaded on my frame, and I'm going to be working on my Quinique 21X Elite long arm today. I also have a 19, but I have swapped that out of my long arm room. That is now downstairs, but we'll be working on this today. So I am using a Superior Fantastico 40 weight variegated thread. I decided to go with orange, and I'm just going to do an all over doodle designs. I'm just going to go with the flow. Let's get started. Okay, so now I am finished quilting my panel, which includes the main fabric and the lining fabric. And now it's time to cut those pattern pieces and seal the edges. If you remember, all we really needed was a fat quarter fabric to make this project. However, because I was getting a little fancy with my African fabric and cheating to use the one half of the yard for the back and one for the front, I quilted a half yard. But I am going to get even a little more creative. Since this is going to be my front and this is going to be my back, I am going to fussy cut a little bit just to make things more interesting. Okay. So to get started, I am going to cut the bag front and the bag back from this fabric. Now I'm going to cut out the side strip. Okay, so now I have cut out all the pieces for the body of the bag, and this is what I have left over. This is plenty for another project. So I am going to save this for another bag. Okay, so now the next thing that we have to do is we're going to round the corners here on the bag front and the bag back, and then once we do that, we're going to seal the edges of each piece by sewing around the cutout piece about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. But the first thing we're going to do is round the corners. So what I'm going to use is I have my 2.5 inch round rotary cutter. And this is going to help me get the nice round edges. But if you're using a template, you might want to use a marking pen. So I'm just going to line that up to the edge and just round that corner right there. And I'm going to do it on all 4 corners. This is going to be nice to give the bag shape. Good. There's the first piece, and now I'll do the next piece. Same thing. Here we go. So here are our pieces for the front and the back. Here is our piece that is going to be the side strip. That's going to be the bottom and the sides of the bag. And then this is the top. This is going to be two pieces that I've cut out. That's going to be the zipper strip. This is what we're going to use to insert the zipper. Ah, starting to look like a bag, huh? Not bad. Okay, so the next step is to seal the edges. We want to top stitch and seal the edges down because that is going to keep it from catching, you know, any loose fabric that wasn't quilted, and also it's going to compress that, and it's just going to make it easier when we construct the bag and we're sewing the seams together. It's just going to make it tighter and easier to line up. So I am just going to top stitch around all of these pieces. Okay, so now I have sealed the edges for all of the pieces. As you can see, I've just sewn as close to the edge as I can get. And now that just made it nice and sturdy. And when we start putting the bag together, it's just going to make the seam tighter and easier to manage. Okay, so now that that is ready, the next step is preparing the zipper strip. So let's do that.